let me know. Today's class is on evaluating and pitching a screenplay for commercial production. Evaluating and pitching a screenplay for commercial production. From our previous discussions, it would have become obvious that screenplay or writing a screenplay is at the heart of the movie making business. The key word here is business. It's a business. And it's supposed to do what? To make money. Producers are eager to make movies that will give them money. And they are always on the lookout for screenplay so today we'll look at how the things that will help you make your screenplay viable. So that's what we'll be focusing on today. How do you convince a producer to part with his millions just to fund, sure that he will get his money back and make profit? There's no sentiment here, okay? Producers are businessmen and are interested in doing what? Making profit. So one of the biggest misconceptions in filmmaking is this, that a good story will automatically become a successful film. Well, sorry to disappoint you, but that's not true. The film industry is full of excellent stories that were never produced, and films with simple stories that became global successes. The difference is not just storytelling. The difference is audience appeal, marketability, and production feasibility. Understanding this difference is what separates writers from professional film makers. So if you want to be a professional filmmaker, you need to understand all the other factors that will contribute to the success of your screenplay. In the Nigerian and global film industry, a screenplay is not just a piece of art. It is a business product. I repeat, it's a business product, and you have to learn to treat it that way. Producers, investors, and studios evaluate scripts to determine whether they are worth producing financially and creatively. So this guide walks you through the complete process, from story analysis to audience appeal, production feasibility, and the art of the pitch. Now, when a reader goes through your work, the reader can make one of these three comments. A pass means that it's not worth producing. The screenplay is not worth producing. Consider means it is promising but needs work. Recommend means it is ready for development. And I believe as a serious screenplay writer, you want to get the recommend option. And that's why we've set up this lesson. So let's look at evaluating the story. How do producers evaluate a story? Okay. Before any other consideration, a script is judged on the strength of each story across four major areas: the concept, the structure, the character, and the craft. Professional coverage readers assess each of these dimensions before issuing a recommendation. So let's look at story quality: concept, structure, character, dialogue. Okay, these are the things that make up your story quality. Another thing is audience appeal. audience what? Appeal. Remember, at the end of the day, it's the movie is meant for what? An audience. And if it doesn't appeal to them, for them to part with their money, it means it will be a loss. So important things to consider under audience appeal is what? Genre, emotion, relatability based on our budget, locations that you want. Maybe you need a waterfall or something, and we might not be able to get such a location. And then casting, determine production feasibility. And we'll break down all these things in the course of the class. So let's look at the concept or the core idea. The first question every producer asks is this: is this idea interesting enough to sell a movie? A high concept story can be explained in one sentence and immediately sparks excitement. The stronger the concept, the easier the what? Marketing. Now, you need a high concept. How do you know that you've gotten a high concept? You distill it into a sentence and maybe share it with your friends, share it with your neighbors. Okay? If you don't get the wow expression, then maybe you're not dealing with what? A high concept. Now, a weak concept. Let's look at a weak concept. A man reflects on his life. This is a weak concept. Okay? You're telling a story about a man that's reflecting on his life. It is generic, it is passive, and it is difficult to market. Who cares about what a man is musing over? Nobody cares. There's no inherent tension or what? Hook. Let's look at an example of a strong concept. A detective realizes the serial killer he's hunting can predict crimes before they happen. A detective realizes the serial killer he's hunting can predict crimes before they what? Happen. Okay? Now you can see the conflict there already. This serial killer is even useful, okay, to the detective. And this opens up vistas of thoughts and opportunities for even more conflict. Okay? So this strong concept is unique, it is visual, and immediately raises compelling questions about how the story does what? Unfolds. Okay? So that's the difference between a weak concept and a strong concept. A strong concept is unique, easy to explain. If you can't explain it easily, then it is not a strong word concept. And it is visually what? Interesting. And that's what makes it marketable. All right? High concept ideas are always easier to what? To finance and distribute. And even as a new writer, a high concept will help you get your foot in the door. So always try to hunt for what? For a high concept. The next thing they look at is the log line. So the log line is the single most powerful tool in a writer's arsenal. It summarizes the entire story in one or two compelling sentences. And it is often the only thing a busy producer reads first. A weak log line means the script rarely gets opened. Okay? So you need a strong log line. So what are the components of the log line? The protagonist, it defines who is the central character. The goal, what is he looking for? Or what are they desperately searching for, or what they want? Conflict, what stands in their way? What's keeping them from achieving their goal? Stakes, what happens if they fail to achieve their goal? and then the unique hook. What makes this story special? Okay, so these are the components of a log line. Let's see an example of a log line here. When a journalist uncovers a deadly corruption scandal, she must expose a powerful governor before he silences the final witness. Okay, now you can see the unique hook there. Before he does what? Silences the final witness. Now, this is like a ticking clock situation. All right, you realize that you're already in conflict with what? Time. Time is not on the protagonist's what? Side. All right, and then you can see the stakes. You're dealing with a powerful governor. You can imagine the arsenal at his what? Disposal. And then you realize the protagonist is equally what? A female. All right, and that makes her even more vulnerable. Okay, and her goal is what? Clear. She needs to expose this scandal. Okay, so you can see all these elements in this simple what? Log line. And that's the kind of log line that producers, that will catch a producer's what? Eye. Okay, another thing we'll look at is the opening, the first 10 pages. Okay, there are sorts of theories. Some people say the first page, the first 10 pages, some might even say the entire work. But then remember, somebody's reading it and they have eyes for there's something they are looking for, right? So if in maybe the first 10 pages you're unable to capture their attention and keep it, of course they might not read further. So producers and scriptwriters often decide whether to continue reading within the first 10 pages. The opening must establish the world, tone, and stakes immediately. There is no room for a slow burn at this stage. Every page must earn what? Its place. Okay? Remember, I would say not just the first 10 pages, but every single page. All right? Every single page matters. Okay? Every single page matters. All right? So your goal is to ensure they turn to the next page. Okay? You have to ensure they turn to the next page. From page one should be interesting enough to move you to the next page, and then the next page. Every page must keep the reader going to the next. That's my advice. So you have to grab attention. Open with a scene that creates immediate curiosity, tension, or visual impact. Okay? Now you introduce the protagonist. Establish who we are following and why we should care about them. And why we should care about them. Now, establish the genre. The tone and genre must be unmistakable from the opening scenes. Okay? And then present conflict. The central problem or inciting tension should emerge quickly and clearly. Weak openings include long exposition, backstory dumps, and scenes without any tension or forward momentum. Okay? This reminds me of a movie that I watched and I love to watch. Okay? I love to watch The Good, the Bad, the Ugly. The first scene, you see three men with their approaching a house, and then they pull their pistols at some point, and then they break into the house, and then you hear gunshots, and through a glass window, the next scene, a character smashes through a glass window on a horse. A character on a horse smashes through a glass window and races away, or gallops away. And that's a way of what? Grabbing attention. You want to know what really happened. And then they now show the three guys that came in earlier. They were already, two of them were already dead. And then one of them stumbles out, shoots at the fleeing character. And that was and then the scene cut. Of course, you want to know what will happen next. That's how to grab what? Attention. And then you introduce the protagonist. The protagonist in the movie, the good, was introduced, the way they introduced him, okay, he saved a man that was about to be, a criminal that was about to be what? Hanged, all right? He just shot through the rope around his neck and cut it, and the guy escaped, okay? So you see him coming in with what? Strength. All right, and you want to know more about this person, all right? And you have to establish the genre, like when I say it's a Western in this case, okay, or maybe a thriller, because different people are, different audience are attracted to different genres. There are people that are attracted to horror, there are people that are attracted to maybe romance, okay, or maybe comedy. So you need to establish what? Your genre and make the conflict clear. Okay, the central problem or inciting tension should emerge quickly and what? Clearly. Story structure. Most commercially successful films follow a 3-act structure. You've already learned about different story structures, okay? But no matter how you look at it, a story always has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And that's more like the 3-act structure. Every story mustn't follow this structure, but the most successful stories have adapted to this structure. So this framework is not a creative cage, okay? Just like you have a framework for sewing a shirt, yet you have different people sewing shirts differently, okay? Just like you can have a recipe for making a soup, yet different people make the same soup and it tastes differently, okay, following the same recipe. So it's not a cage. Actually, when there's a structure, it kind of tasks your creativity, okay? It tasks your creativity and brings out the uniqueness in you. So the framework is not a creative cage. It is a proven architecture for building emotional momentum and audience satisfaction. A dragging second act is one of the most common and damaging problems in unproduced screenplays. Okay, let's talk about the second act, because now when you the act one is the setup. Okay, you've set up the problem. We've seen the inciting incident. Okay, we've seen how the protagonist's world is turned upside down, and now we now want to know what will happen. Would he survive this? Would he win? Would he lose? Okay, but you can't just jump to the climax. You need to build up to it, and that's where the second act comes in. That's the escalation. And that's where most of the problems come in. How do you sustain the suspense and the tension? Okay, how do you even ascend the beat ladder so that every new experience trumps the one prior to it? Okay, so that's where some of the scripts fall flat. So you have to be careful with your act two, the escalation. You must build in intensity. Okay, like they say, usually when you have a problem, even in real life, you're always looking for the easiest way out. Okay, so that's what your protagonist should start from. You should look for the easiest way out. When that one fails, then by the time he fails, the problem he gets even bigger, right? And then he tries the next available thing, it gets even worse. Okay, so that's how you build it. You start from the easiest way out. Of course, he will fail, and then the next logical thing, he fails, and then the problem keeps what? Getting bigger and bigger till you get to the point of what? Of no return, or the so-called midpoint and dark night of the soul, where all hope is lost. That's how your act 2 should end. Okay, you take him to the to a cliff, and then just push him off from there, right? That's how your act 2 should end. The all hope should be what? Lost. And then you enter into act 3, and then the protagonist gradually gets himself together and all that. So the reader checks the story structure to ensure it can sustain the emotional expectations of the audience. So the 3-act structure is usually recommended because it's proven itself over and over again. So let's look at the protagonist evaluation. Okay, how does a reader evaluate your protagonist? Remember, your protagonist is the engine of the story. Audiences invest time and emotion in a character they believe in. So your protagonist has to be what? Believable. All right? And that belief comes from watching characters act, not simply what? React. Okay, passive protagonists are one of the fastest ways to lose a producer's what? Interest. Your protagonist has to be what? Active. He has to be invested in achieving his goal. It has to be important to him. Okay, so what they check whether your protagonist has a clear goal. So the protagonist must want something specific and urgent. All right, vague desires create vague stories. All right, your protagonist is looking for money. It's a vague desire. How much is money? Okay, is it 100 naira? Is it 1,000? Okay, but your protagonist is looking for 1,000,000 naira because this child needs what? To undergo a surgery, and then probably you can even use the ticking clock. Within, say, 3 days, he needs to raise 1,000,000 naira, and this guy is a janitor, not like he's a or maybe he's even jobless. Okay, so there has to be a clear goal, and you need to be what? Specific and not vague. Active agency. They must take deliberate what? Action to pursue their goal, not wait for things to happen to them. They can't be going around crying and like begging people to help them. They have to take the what? The initiative. I saw a YouTube shot of an 86-year-old woman that was arrested for theft. Okay, and what happened? Her husband, that was about 90-something, was dying at home. He needed a particular drug. They couldn't afford it, so she went to the store. She didn't have enough money for it because of the inflation. She didn't know the price had changed. And the next thing, the woman goes back to the store and steals the drug. Okay, so that's agency. Okay, your protagonist must be doing something to solve his problem. Meaningful obstacles. Every obstacle should test the protagonist's what? Values, skills, or relationships in revealing what? Ways. Okay? Remember that character can only be seen when you mount what? Pressure. You could have a big guy and a small guy, and then you might feel the big guy might be, might appear to be so confident till you point a gun at both of them, and the big guy starts urinating on himself. Meanwhile, the small guy doesn't. So it's when you mount pressure or there's an obstacle, that's when your character comes out. So you use obstacles. That's when the obstacles are meaningful, when you use them to bring out the character of your protagonist. So your obstacles should be meaningful. And then the next thing is what? Transformation. Okay. They evaluate your protagonist on what? Transformation. Does the protagonist learn any lessons? Okay. Does the protagonist change at the end of the story, whether emotionally, morally, or both? Okay. That it's important in evaluating the word protagonist. Remember, it's through the protagonist that you're advancing your point of what? Of view. Okay. So you have to start with the normal and then end us where you want us to be using the transformation in the life of your what? Protagonist. So these are the things that are what? Evaluated by what? Producers and readers. Also, your antagonist should be evaluated as well. The antagonist is only as powerful as their what? Motivation. Okay. Nobody is 100% bad and nobody is 100% good. All right. A human being should always has that what? Balance. But of course, the protagonist leans more towards his goodness, if I should use the word, while the antagonist leans more towards his what? The evil in him. Okay, so the best villains in cinema history are not simply evil. They believe completely in the righteousness of their own cause. Let me mention the villain in the movie, The Good, the Bad, the Ugly, like that I mentioned. When he was introduced, he had come to assassinate someone, and then the man now decides to pay him not to kill him. Well, and then the man pays him to go kill the other man that sent him by paying him more. But he has his own rules of engagement. So he collects the money and still kills him. All right, because according to him, he always gets the job done. Okay, and then he returns to the man that sent him and also kills him as well. Okay, because he always gets the job done. So the antagonist is not simply evil. They believe completely in the righteousness of their own what? Cause. That's the only way they can be pursuing it. Okay, if you really believe that what you're doing is evil, it's difficult for you to really defend it. Okay, that's why a thief can be caught by even a small boy. Okay, a small boy can catch a thief, and there's nothing the thief can do because inside him he knows, hey, I'm on the wrong. So a weak antagonist produces a weak what? Story. Your antagonist has to have a motivation why he's doing what he is doing. Whether, like in this case, he has a code of what? Conduct. All right. Now, the protagonist can only be as compelling as the force opposing them. So if your antagonist is not strong enough, then it makes the job easy for your protagonist. And if that happens, then there's no drama. Okay, imagine maybe a mature man fighting with maybe a 14-year-old boy. There's no drama there. All right, you don't even want to watch. It doesn't make sense. Except, of course, the 14-year-old boy is a black belter. Okay, a black belt holder. Okay, and maybe you make it clear that this guy had killed so many people in his lifetime. So the protagonist, the antagonist has to be a compelling what? Force. He has to challenge the what? Protagonist. So he challenges the protagonist. These are the basis upon which your antagonist is what? Evaluated. Challenges the protagonist. The antagonist must directly threaten what the protagonist values what? Most, creating unavoidable confrontation. Like I said, human beings, we're always looking for the easy way what? Out. Okay? If you don't constrain the conflict in such a way that both of them are actually looking for the same thing, okay, then you don't really have an unavoidable confrontation. So you have to ensure the antagonist threatens what the protagonist values what? Most. Now, does the antagonist escalate the conflict? Each interaction with the antagonist should raise the stakes and push the story towards its what? Climax. Okay? So you should plan in such a way that your story should make sure that each time the antagonist shows up, all right, the stakes go what? Higher. And then the antagonist believes they are what? Right. The most compelling antagonists have clear, understandable, even sympathetic motivations for their what? Actions. So the antagonist must believe in their own righteousness. The seventh thing, we'll look at conflict and what? Stakes. Conflict and what? Stakes. So conflict is the heartbeat of every word story. Without conflict, there is no story. I repeat, without conflict, there is no story. So without it, there's no drama. Only what? Description, just describing an event that took place somewhere. Okay? Every scene, every conversation, every moment of action should carry some form of what? Opposition, tension, or what? Consequence. Stakes answer the fundamental question audiences are always asking. Why does any of these matter? Why does it matter? Okay? So let's look at conflict elements. Opposition between what? Forces. Persistent tension that refuses to resolve easily. Clear consequences for choices what? Made. Okay? So these are elements of a good word? Conflict. And then let's look at the types of stakes. What can go wrong? What does the protagonist stand to lose, okay, if it does not accomplish his what? Aim. Okay? Let's look at types of stakes. Death or physical survival. Loss of love or what? Family. Justice versus what? Injustice. Reputation and what? Identity. Moral or spiritual what? Survival. Okay? So these are the types of stakes that the protagonist or your screenplay should have. Because like we mentioned, if there's really nothing at stake, if there's really nothing to lose, okay, there's really no tension. Okay, so to build your tension, okay, and drive your audience to the climax you desire, you need to learn how to raise the stakes. Always ask yourself, what does the protagonist stand to lose? Okay, because that's what will motivate him to fight back. All right, in spite of the opposition. So scene quality. Every scene in a script must justify its existence. We've already mentioned that in the last class. Fillers must be avoided. Okay, where you pick a scene, you ask yourself, does it belong here? If it doesn't, cut it out. It must earn its inclusion. A scene that does not advance the story, it doesn't deepen the character or escalate conflict is filler. And experienced readers will mark it as such immediately. The best scenes do multiple things at once. Okay? A scene might do multiple things, but the important thing is that it is contributing to to the story. Okay? It's deepening character or escalating conflict. So for the scene quality, they check the goal. What's the goal of this scene? So every scene begins with a character wanting something, even if minor. All right. So every scene is driven by a certain character that wants something. Okay, and that determines the tone of the scene. Okay, that sets the grounds for what happens in that scene. Okay, and then the conflict. Something stands in the way of that goal, creating friction and tension. So you have to ensure that there must be opposition. If there's no opposition to the goal, like somebody comes in and says, hey, give me like I was watching a movie, the guy comes and says, okay, give me food, right? And then the woman just says, okay, you can have the food. There's no story there, all right? So you have to ensure there is what? Conflict. There has to be opposition to the what? To the desire or the goal. Now, escalation. The conflict builds within the scene, intensifying with each what? Exchange. Okay? And then the turning point. That's where you release the tension and then something changes. Maybe a revelation, a decision, a shift in what? Power. Maybe the person leading the scene gets what he's looking for, or maybe he doesn't get it. Okay? Or maybe the scene turns around and the hunter becomes what? The hunted. So there should be a turning point, and then the outcome. The scene ends in a different emotional or narrative place than where it began. So if a scene starts with a happy mood, okay, it can't end with the same happy mood. Either you take it up a happier mood, okay, or a sad mood, but it can't end, in the same with the same beat that you started with. So it must end in a different emotional or narrative word place. So that's about scene quality. The next one we'll look at is dialogue. Dialogue is one of the clearest indicators of a writer's skill level. Amateur dialogue tends to be on the nose, repetitive, and expository, explaining what characters feel rather than revealing it through behavior and what? Subtext. Okay, a character keeps saying, I'm sad, I'm so sad. Rather than you revealing it what? Visually. Okay, and on the nose dialogue, this is like everyday talk. Movies not even though it's based on real life, sometimes experiences, okay, it is still not what happens in your daily life. The way movie characters talk is quite different, okay? So you don't go explaining how characters feel and all that, and you have to equally learn to use what? Subtext. So professional dialogue is always in service of character and story, never of the writer's need to what? To explain. Like a writer, a script professional said, there are two things: what you, the writer, wants the character to say, and what the character ends up what? Saying. Of course, what you want the character to say will guide your writing. The character will say it, but how the character says it, okay, depends on the uniqueness of that word, of that character. Okay, the way a polished banker will talk, okay, it's not the same way maybe an urchin or maybe a barrow pusher would what? Say the same thing. But they're saying the same thing, but they have to say it in their own words, unique ways. And that's the dialogue we are talking about. So dialogue has to be what? Natural. It sounds like real speech pattern, okay? Incomplete sentences, interruptions, contractions. Remember, movie is not drama, it's not theater, okay? It is not play, all right? In play and theater, words matter more. So you see people taking turns to talk. One person, after talking, then the other person talks. But movie is natural, like in real life. You're arguing with someone, okay? The person wants to say something. You already know where he's heading. So you interrupt him, you cut him short, okay? And then someone wants to lie. They stammer, I, they don't just, say what they want straight. So the dialogue has to be what? Natural, okay? And then you ask somebody, how are you? They don't say, I am fine. Sometimes they just say fine, okay? All right, so that's the way it has to be. It has to sound real, all right? So you can use incomplete sentences, interruptions, okay? And what? Contractions. Also, dialogue has to be character specific. each character speaks with a distinct what voice that could not be what you couldn't really miss it. Okay, so each character it's not the way maybe the villain talks that the protagonist will do what will talk. A villain has to talk like a bad guy. All right, so your dialogue has to be what character specific. All right, then subtextual. That's how human beings talk. Okay, they say one thing, they mean another. Okay, mommy, where do I put it? Put it on my head. Does not mean you have to go, dump it on her head. That's subtext. All right, it has a totally different meaning, and that's how people talk in real life, and that's how professional writers write. Okay. Now, concise. It has to be concise. No line stays on screen longer than it needs to. Wordiness kills what? Pacing and tensions. The longer people talk, like even in real life, when people really want to fight, they don't talk too much. Okay? So that they don't, because once they start talking, they start dissipating the tension. Okay, so the same way in movies, when you have long lines, okay, except of course where absolutely necessary, but try as much as possible to be what? Concise. So dialogue, they check for the naturalness of your dialogue, whether it's character specific or are all the characters speaking the same way. This happens when the writer has not fully developed his or her characters. Okay, you notice that it's the writer's voice you hear, not the character speaking. All right, and then try to inculcate subtext in your writing. Okay, and then be concise. So that's it for dialogue. Visual storytelling. Okay, like I mentioned, film is quite different from play and theater. Okay, even though those preceded films, but over time, they had to adapt the movie making away from theater and play because they're not the same medium. Okay, so film is above all a visual medium. If you've been writing plays and theaters, if you're going to write a screenplay, it's a totally different kettle of what? Fish. Okay, you have to bear that in mind. A screenplay must communicate emotion, character, and story through images and what? Action. You're actually writing imagery and action. Okay, you're really not writing words. You're painting a picture. Okay, not through internal narration or explanatory descriptions. Okay, readers and producers are always looking for scripts that understand this fundamental truth. Remember, the reader that's reading your that's the first part of call for your script. The movie hasn't been made yet. Okay, so it is your writing. They have to see the movie in your writing. Okay, so that is what visual storytelling is all about. So let's look at an example. She feels what he said to her. Now, there's a problem here. Okay, you're describing an internal state. How does a camera capture feeling? Okay, let that sink. How do you capture what? Feeling. You can't. All right? There has to be an action or maybe a reaction. So let's look at a strong writing on the other hand. Now, the same sentence, but now written in a visual storytelling form. She throws the phone across the room, shattering it against the wall. You don't need anybody to tell you that this person is angry. So the audience is supposed to infer from what you've written what is going on. You don't need to tell them that she's angry. They infer from her actions that she is what? Angry. Okay, so this is a visual action. It communicates emotion through behavior. The camera can what? Capture. Remember, the camera, you should be asking yourself, can the camera capture this? So that's what the reader asks himself when he's reading your script. Okay, can the camera capture what you've written? So the mantra is show, don't do what? Tell. Show, don't what? Tell. You must have heard it like a million times now. Emotion communicated through physical action is always more cinematic and more powerful than what? Emotion described through what? Narration. Every moment of inner feeling should have an external visual expression. Okay, another thing they do is to evaluate audience what? Appeal. Remember, the producer is in business to make money, and he has to appeal to his what? Customers, the audience. All right, so he's looking for what would appeal to them, what he can market to them. Okay, so even the most brilliantly crafted script will struggle to get produced if no one can articulate who will watch it. It's important. Who is this? You know, it's important you ask yourself, even as you're writing, who am I writing for? Who am I doing what? Writing for? Because that's how producers think. So producers think in terms of audiences, demographics, and market what? Segments. Because these determine marketing budgets, distribution strategies, and ultimately profitability. The fundamental producer question, who will watch this film and why? Why will they pay to do what? To do so. Okay? Going to a cinema might cost you up to like maybe 8,000, 10,000. So you should think about it. What will make someone pay 10,000 to come watch this your what? Story. Okay? So that's the producer's fundamental question. And that should be yours as well. So audience clarity is not a creative compromise. It is a commercial what? Necessity. The clearer a script's target audience, the more confidently a producer can commit to financing and what? Distributing it. Okay? So let's move on to your target audience. So that's the question you ask yourself, even as you're writing, who am I writing for? Okay? So a script must have a clearly identifiable audience. The group of viewers most likely to seek it out and pay for it and recommend it. Okay? The clearer this definition, the more actionable the marketing strategy becomes. Okay? In one of his interviews, I think it was Fela's son, Femi, that was asked about his father's style of music. And he mentioned that his dad told him one time that what he actually sells to people, or what he provides for people, is what? Hope. Okay? That his target audience is the ordinary man on the street who is downtrodden. Okay? He wants to see, get back at probably the corrupt politicians, but he can't. And he does that for him and gives him hope that, yes, somebody is what? Fighting on his behalf. So he was clear about who his audience was. And of course, you know, his music, we all know how legendary it became, or it still even is. Okay? So you have to be clear about what? Your target audience. Now, your audience doesn't have to be broad, undefined audiences. That's a red flag for producers. Okay? They need to be specific, because it will help them to make their calculations properly. So it helps them evaluate their commercial potential, because if you're specific about your audience, at least they can evaluate probably a certain population, and then will this population be able to even pay for this movie, right? So if you're making a movie for maybe teenagers, okay, coming of age movie, sort of, all right, and that's your target, you have to be, the producer have to be careful the amount of money he's investing in the movie, bearing in mind that he needs to recoup it. This group of people, how much can they really afford to pay for a movie. So you have to, so that the producer has to make sure he gets it to their level. So it's important. Now, by age group, you could define your target audience by their age group. So your movie, is it for children and family audiences? Is it for teenagers and young adults? Okay. If you notice, most of the children movies are equally, most of them are intertwined with what? Family. Okay, because of course the kids might not be watching alone, their parents might equally be what? Involved. So you have to define by age group, whether it's for children and family audiences, teenagers and young adults, maybe between 13 and 24, adults 25 to 45. These are the people that constitute the working class that have the money. So these are the core cinema what? Demographic. These are the core target of cinemas. Or maybe you're making a movie for what? Mature audiences. That's maybe from 45 plus. So another way to define your target audience is by interest what? Group. Okay, you can define your target audience by interest group. Those that like horror and thriller, the horror and thriller fans, action and adventure audiences. Some people prefer romance and drama viewers. Some people prefer crime and mystery. These are crime and mystery lovers. Some are moved by faith-based and inspirational movies. So you can define your audience based on their what? Interest group. The next thing we look at is genre demand. The genre demand. So genre is not a creative limitation. It is a commercial what? Signal. You know, like in every other thing, you try to, even in movie business, they try to classify their movies or products. The same way a car manufacturer will brand his cars, okay? And or even you have sedan, you have maybe wagon, you have bus, you have a truck, okay? You have hatchback. The same way, in movie, you have different genres, and it's for commercial purposes. All right. So certain genres have built-in audience demand, established marketing playbooks, and predictable distribution pathways. All right. So you have to be clear on your genre. Producers rely on genre to communicate the film's value proposition to distributors, exhibitors, and streaming platforms before a single frame is shot. So let's look at thriller. These are the different genres. You have thriller / crime. Okay, it has a consistent global demand. It has strong streaming performance and international sales potential. Remember that the producers already have data on the performance of this genre. Okay, so they already understand what they are looking for. Horror. It has high return on investment on modest budgets. Okay, so if you're writing a horror and it will not be made on a modest budget, maybe it might be flagged. Okay, so if you're writing a horror based on the data, it has a high return on investment but on modest budgets. It has a proven audience loyalty and strong opening weekend performance. Action movies, okay, are globally marketable with strong international sales, because you know in action movies they cut across cultures because there's very little dialogue. Okay, there's limited dialogue. You can see the event unfolding, things are happening very fast. But there's a problem here. It requires higher budget, because you're crashing this, destroying that. Okay, there's a higher cost to that. But it commands wider release. So if you're writing action, understand the cost implications as well. Okay, and make sure you model your work to suit your producer's budget. Romance and comedy. These have strong domestic performance and streaming what? Demand. You know, when it comes to romance and comedy, you might have cultural constraints. What is funny to Nigerians may not be funny to a Briton. All right, so you have to. That's why it's limited in its appeal. It doesn't have a global appeal, but it has strong domestic performance and streaming demand. It has lower budgets with reliable audience returns. Okay. Let's look at emotional engagement. Um, this is um, this is quite imperative because in the end, why do people go to a cinema if not to feel something? Okay, why do they pay? They want to feel something. So the reader, in assessing your script, has to check the emotional engagement. Does it engage the reader? Okay. Does your script make him want to turn the pages? Does it make him want to know what will happen next? Or maybe after reading a few lines, he remembers his maybe he remembers his landlord, okay, and then his mind wanders. Then you've not caught his attention. You've not affected him emotionally. So the most reliable driver of box office success and streaming viewership is emotional what? Impact. Films that make audiences feel something deeply generate the word of mouth that no marketing budget can do what? Replicate. That's the only reason why after watching your films, people go back and they're like telling their friends, their co-workers, you need to go watch this movie. You need to go watch this movie. And then they ask them, what is the movie about? They can't even remember, but they know that there's something, this movie, it's just great, because it made them feel something. Okay, and that's how they can market, spread the news through word of mouth. Producers look for scripts that guarantee an emotional what? Experience. Okay, in form of suspense. Audiences lean forward, hearts racing, desperate to know what happens what next. Okay, fear, primal and what? Universal. Okay, I remember watching a series in those days, Hammer House of Horror, and they usually put this thing in the night, okay? And we'll be watching it and we are cringing in fear, but we're still watching it. And you would think we'll stop. The next day, the next episode, we are still there watching it. And then when we finish, we race to our rooms, okay? And then the next day, we are still watching it. So fear is another emotion that you could use to engage your what? Audience. So it is primal and what? Universal. Fear creates unforgettable shared viewing what? Experiences. Laughter is another one. Comedy builds loyalty and drives repeat viewings and social what? Sharing. Okay. Another one is what? Empathy. When audiences feel a character's pain or joy, they become emotionally invested in the what? Outcome. Okay. When you can identify or empathize with the resilience, they motivate audiences and generate long-lasting what? Cultural impact. Another thing that's checked is what? Relatability. The most commercially durable films are built on universal human what? Themes. Universal human themes. Okay? Such as love, justice, survival, redemption, family. Okay, remember this cut across what? Cultures. Okay, experiences and emotions that resonate across cultures, generations, and backgrounds. Okay, so a highly specific story can still achieve global reach if it is rooted in something every human being understands. Okay, so if you want your story to achieve a global reach, you have to invest it with universal human what? Themes, such as love, justice, survival, redemption. Okay, these are universal. Family. Okay, these are universal human themes that are relatable. People can relate with it from wherever. I remember those days we used to watch Chinese movies, even as kids. Of course, we didn't really know, we didn't hear what they were saying, but you could see that this guy has been hurt and he needs to take what? Revenge. Okay, that sort of thing. Okay, these are universal human what? Themes that resonate across what? Cultures. Let's look at cultural and global what? Appeal. Cultural and global appeal. So in today's streaming dominated market, producers are increasingly evaluating scripts for their international what? Potential. So I think with the internet and the global reach that even ordinary people have today, it's only normal for producers to aspire to have international what? Influence. So they're looking for scripts that will help them achieve that. So a film that only works for a local audience has limited revenue upside. Remember, they want to make money. And the more people their movies can move or reach, the better for them. So stories with universal themes, internationally relatable characters, and genre clarity tend to travel furthest. Okay? So you have to try to ensure your story has a global what? Appeal, because of course producers would snap it up. Local audiences. Strong local cultural resonance builds the core audience and supports domestic box office performance. So if you're interested in the domestic box office, yes, a strong local cultural resonance will build you that. It will build those core audience that will patronize your work. So if you want to get regional audiences, for instance, in our case, West African and Pan-African markets, they represent a growing underserved audience for quality storytelling. So you have access to these audiences in West Africa and then the rest of Africa. That's the regional what? Audiences. We are defining the audiences. You have the local audiences, the regional audiences, and then you have the international what? Viewers. Okay? Genre films, especially thrillers, action, and what? Crime. So if you want to reach an international audience, you have to base your story on genres like thrillers, action, and what? Crime. Because they travel well globally and attract streaming platform acquisitions. Okay? So let's move on to budget feasibility. Budget feasibility. If you go to the market and you see something you like and you don't have the money, will you still buy it? No. Okay, so no matter how good your script is, the budget for producing it is important to the what? Producer. So even a brilliantly written script may fail to get produced if its production requirements outpace what the market will support financially. So even if the producer has the money, right? And then the question is, if he plows in this money, would he get it back? Okay? So it's important. Producers always read scripts with one eye on the story and another on the production line items, accumulating in the what? Margins. So efficient scripts are significantly easier to what? To finance. All right? So you have to ensure your scripts, your writing, your scripts are what? Efficient, which means they are what? Easier to what? Finance. It will help you it will help increase your chances of getting your scripts produced. So these are the things that could that line up when it comes to budget feasibility. Locations. If you have multiple exotic or period locations dramatically increase what? Cost. Maybe you want to do like maybe a 14th century movie, okay, where you have different props and all that. It might increase what? Cost. So even if you're writing such a movie, you should bear in mind the cost and try to even reduce it in your what? Writing. And when you have multiple locations, that's already extra cost. So stories that are contained within a set in a few locations are far more what? Financeable. Okay. Another thing is cast size. Your cast size should be what? Should be minimal. Okay, large ensemble cast multiply talent what? Fees. Remember, everybody has to be what? Paid. Okay, at some level. So tight character-driven stories with small casts are more budget what? Efficient. So if you build it around a character, okay, it will help you weed out unnecessary what? Cast. Anybody that's not either that's not contributing to the character's progress or failure, already it's easy for you to eliminate them. Okay. And then when it comes to stunts and visual effects, these are costs. So you have to like in action sequences, they require special crews, equipment, and significant post-production what? Budgets. So you minimize stunts and what? Visual effects, okay, to save cost. And then you have crowd scenes. Large crowd scenes require like maybe a stadium or something, require extensive what? Coordination, extras, and logical overhead that rapidly inflate what? Budget. So you have to find a way to deal with scenes that will involve large crowd. You can, like we mentioned the last time, you can imply what? A scene. Okay, you can imply it in dialogue and not have to show it if possible, and that's a way of ensuring budget what? Feasibility. Let's look at marketing potential. Marketing what? Potential. Can your movie be marketed? Can it be sold? Can if you tell someone about this movie, would it excite them enough for them to part with their what? Money? So a film without a clear marketing strategy rarely gets what? Financed. How do you market this movie? Okay, to your target audience. Producers and distributors are always imagining the campaign as they what? Read. The poster, the trailer, the social media moments. If a script cannot generate compelling marketing assets, it becomes commercially what? Risky, regardless of its artistic what? Merit. So let's look at the marketing in terms of strong poster imagery. Okay, we'll look at it in terms of the poster, the trailer, and then why you need memorable what? Scenes. So a strong poster imagery. Does the script contain a central image or moment that communicates the entire film in a single word? Frame? A hero in danger, a mysterious location, a face that tells what? A story. These are elements or items that you need to inject in your script so that you have to if they're making a marketing poster for it, that's what will show up on the what? Poster. So you have to ask yourself, do I have any of these items in my what? Script? Okay, that could be used to make strong poster what? Imagery. Another one is the exciting trailer moments. Okay, because when they release the trailer for a movie, that's the part of the what? Marketing. Okay, before the audience see the main movie. Okay, so the questions are there 3 to 5 sequences of escalating excitement, shock, or emotion that can be what? Assembled into a 2-minute trailer that demands what? Attention. So there has to be sequences, okay, in your script that can be assembled, all right, into a 2-minute trailer that demands what? Attention. So as you're writing, you should be asking yourself this question as well, because that's a question that producers and readers would ask or demand from your script. Now, memorable scenes. Great films contain scenes people do what? Quote, reference, and share for what? Years. Okay? Now, these scenes become cultural assets that extend the film's marketing what? Life. Like the movie I mentioned, The Good, the Bad, the Ugly. Okay? There's a statement that comes from the movie where someone was about to shoot one of the characters, and then he was delaying. And then the next thing, the other guy pulls a gun and shoots him. And then he tells him, if you want to shoot, shoot, don't talk. And it has, over the years, you might even have heard it even in different environments. Okay, so a great film needs to contain scenes people do what? Quote, reference, and share for years. So these scenes become cultural assets that extend the film's what? Marketing life. So that's about marketing what? Potential. And these are things you should have in mind as you're working on your what? Script. Another thing producers consider is what? Distribution what? Potential. Understanding where a film will find its what? Audience is as important as understanding who that audience is. So where are they? Where can they be what? Found. All right. So if you're in Nigeria, you're writing for people in America, how do you get it to them? Okay. So different distribution channels have different what? Content, appetites, and what? Experienced producers evaluate scripts, okay, against each channel's specific requirements before committing to what? Production. So they have to evaluate your script against their what? Specific what? Requirements. Okay. So if you're writing for a cinema, it requires event level story what? Telling, spectacle, scale, or an experience that justifies leaving what? Home. Okay, so for people to leave their home to go to a cinema and watch it, it has to be what? Justified. So if you're writing for cinema, it has to justify. You have to justify pulling them away from out of their houses to come to the cinema to watch your movie. If it's for streaming platforms, so platforms prefer strong hooks, immediate tension, and stories that reward what? Bind watching what? Behavior. People that, it has to be addictive. All right. That kind of story. That's what they prefer on streaming what? Platforms. And your hook has to come in early. No time for what? Fluffs. Okay. And then if you're writing for television, it has to have a series potential, and recurring characters are what? Are valued. So episodic structures, it can open additional what? Revenue streams. So it has to be what? Episodic, and it has to have that series what? Potential. If you're writing for television. And for film festivals, so for award circuit films, they need distinctive voices, bold themes, and cinematic what? Ambition over commercial formula. They are not more, they are for film festivals, they are more interested in promoting the art, okay, not necessarily the commerce or the commercial side of your writing. So you have to be cognizant of the distribution potential or the channels you want to use for your story. Okay, let's share with you some secrets, okay, or what we call the trailer what? Test. So experienced producers do not just read scripts, they watch them in their what? Minds. they watch them in their what? Mind. So while reading, they are constantly asking whether the sequence they are reading would survive in a 2-minute what? Trailer designed to sell the film to a global what? Audience. If the answer is no for long stretches, the script has what? A problem. So as they're reading, they're wondering, this scene, how do we arrange it into what? A trailer. Okay? So in terms of the secrets, you need to inculcate visually exciting what? Moments. Are there scenes with strong cinematic what? Impact, action, spectacle, visual tension that can anchor what? A trailer. Okay? And then another thing is what? Shocking twists. Does the story contain reversals or what? Revelations that create genuine what? Surprise and a strong reason to see the what? Film. Okay? So these are elements that you can introduce, all right, into your writing, okay, with the trailer in what? Mind. The next thing is emotional highlights. Are there deeply felt moments of what? Triumph, loss, or connection that can emotionally hook an audience in under 30 seconds? Okay, so these are important if you want to get a trailer that will stand the test. Okay, so if a script cannot produce a compelling trailer, marketing it becomes nearly what? Impossible, regardless of its narrative what? Quality. Okay, let's look at another secret. The 90-second pitch test. The 90-second what? Pitch test. You want to market your film or your movie idea to a producer. So producers frequently ask writers to explain their story in 90 seconds or what? Less. What this does to you is that it forces you to get to the nitty-gritty of your what? Of your story. Okay? Because by trying to distill your story into a 90-second pitch, you have to, it forces you to come to terms with what exactly your story is all about. So this is not just a conversation starter. It's a diagnostic what? Test. If a writer cannot articulate their own story clearly, excitingly, and concisely in 90 seconds, the story itself may be too complicated, too unfocused, or too unclear to produce. Okay, so your story has to first of all appeal to you, and it has to be what? Clear to you. And by distilling it to a 90-second pitch, you're actually clarifying your point of view. So these are the components of this 90-second pitch. You have your hook, the exciting, irresistible premise that makes the listener want to hear more immediately. You have your protagonist, okay, who is the central character, and why should we care about them? Okay, that's your protagonist. Why should we care about them? And then you have the conflict. What is the central problem that makes this story urgent and what? Unavoidable? And then you have your stakes. What happens if the protagonist fails? Why does it matter to anyone beyond the what? Characters? You have the unique element. What makes this story different from the thousands of others in the same genre? Okay, so these are the elements that your 90-second pitch has to what? Inculcate. The third secret, the 5 story patterns that sell. The 5 story patterns that do what? That sell. Okay, this is based on research. This is based on available what? Data. So for a producer that is interested in making money, he has to, like they say, you stick to what works. You don't change a winning what? Team. So the most commercially successful films across global markets, including Nollywood, tend to follow 5 recognizable story patterns. These are not formulas. I repeat, these are not what? Formulas that stifle creativity. They are proven emotional architectures that audiences instinctively understand and respond to. Writers who master these patterns gain a significant competitive what? Advantage. So let's look at these 5 story patterns. Okay. The first one is the hero's journey. In the hero's journey, an ordinary person, okay, is called to extraordinary what? Challenge, and is transformed by the what? By the experience. Okay. So you have an ordinary person just minding his business, all right, and then he's drawn into the conflict, and he's someone that we don't even expect to succeed, but in the end, he transforms and then achieves his goal. So that's the hero's journey. He becomes what? The hero. And then you have the revenge story, okay, where the wrong protagonist pursues justice at great personal what? Cost. If a movie I can think of now is The Gladiator, okay, where Maximus, I think the Roman general, he was just an ordinary person, and I think it's even the hero's journey, because he was just an ordinary farmer, but ends up becoming the commander of the Roman army, okay, and then in the end, he had to seek revenge against the emperor who killed his what? Family. Well, in the end, he equally died in the process. But that's the revenge story. It's a common war story. And it's a movie I watch over and over again. Okay, I guess, that's why these 5 story patterns, really, they do sell. So we have mentioned the hero's journey and the revenge story. And then you have the survival story. So the character must overcome extreme circumstances to live or protect what? Others. Okay, like the Titanic. Okay, that comes to mind, the survival story. Okay, so the character overcomes extreme circumstances to live or protect what? Others. Okay, and then you have the mystery or investigation, the pursuit of a hidden truth that carries high stakes for the what? Investigator. And then you have redemption story. A flawed or fallen character earns a second chance through sacrifice or what? Growth. Okay? So the next thing we'll look at is how to pitch to producers. How to pitch to what? The producers. Okay? So even a masterfully written script will never reach the screen if the writer cannot pitch it what? Effectively. So what's a pitch? So it's a short, structured, deliberately designed verbal presentation. Its purpose is to convince producers to read the full script or to convince financiers to commit money to its what? Production. So this is all about marketing. Okay? And this will call on your marketing what? Edge. You have to put it together. It is short and it is structured. You have every single word there has to be designed in a way to be able to not to miss its what? Its mark. So it's deliberately designed verbal presentation to convince the producers to read your full script or convince your financiers to part with their money. Okay? So the pitch is not a summary. It is a sales presentation. Every word must be chosen to create what? Desire, urgency, and confidence in the what? Project. Okay? So it is not a summary. Your pitch doesn't have to start from the beginning of your story. Okay? You have to select the important aspects of your story that would evoke what? Emotion. All right? And stitch them together in such a way to make a sales what? Presentation. So professional pitches are concise, structured, and practiced until they feel what? Effortless. You need to practice your pitch over and over and over and over again till you can recite it offhand and effortlessly. Okay? So the best pitches feel like stories being what told, no, not data being what delivered. A strong pitch opens doors that no query letter or email can. Okay, so these are the for your pitch. These are the contents of your pitch or aspects of the pitch. So you start with the hook. So the hook is the opening line of your pitch. The statement that makes a busy producer put down their phone and lean in. It must communicate the most compelling, unique, and exciting aspect of your story in a single sentence. If your hook fails, the rest of the pitch rarely what recovers. So let's look at the formula. Great hooks often begin with what if, okay, to raise what? Curiosity, like a question, or describe an irresistible what? Situation. They imply conflict, uniqueness, and stakes simultaneously. So let's see an example. What if a journalist discovered a corruption scandal so explosive that the most powerful people in government will kill to keep it buried? Okay? Already your mind, the questions are already popping up in your mind. What could this scandal be? Okay? What could, that's what, the hook is supposed to what to do, to engage you. All right? So you could start with a question, what if? So the hook should be rehearsed until it sounds completely what? Natural and what? Spontaneous. Never scripted or mechanical. Let's look at the protagonist. Okay, that's another aspect of your pitch. So after the hook, immediately introduce the central what? Character. Producers need to feel an emotional connection to the protagonist within the first few seconds. This is not the time for full backstory. It is the moment to establish who this person essentially is and why their specific qualities make them the perfect person to carry this story. So these are the things you should include. The name and essential what? Identity. Their defining desire or what? Wound. What makes them specifically what? Compelling. Why they are the right person for this what? Story. Let's see an example. So the story follows Daniel, a once celebrated investigative journalist whose career was destroyed. This is his wound now, by a fabricated what? Scandal. Okay? Automatically we see, remember it's still part of the, connected to the previous hook. We see why he should be interested in this corruption case. So the story, let's read the example through again. The story follows Daniel, a once celebrated investigative journalist whose career was destroyed by a fabricated scandal. He has spent 3 years trying to rebuild his reputation. And this story is his last chance. Okay? So already we have an interesting protagonist. Okay? Another aspect of your pitch is the central conflict. The conflict is the engine of your pitch. Once the producer is invested in your protagonist, they need to understand exactly what stands in the way. And why that obstacle is formidable enough to sustain a feature film. Vague conflicts produce vague pitches. Specific visceral conflicts create urgency. So you need to be specific, okay, when it comes to your conflict. All right? It's not just about millions. Name it, okay? Put a tag on it. Is it 100 million, 500 million, a billion, okay? So you have to be specific when it comes to the conflict. So when Daniel begins investigating, he discovers that every witness connected to the case is dying under suspicious circumstances. And the evidence points directly to people inside the police force itself. Okay, you can see that the conflict is what? Specific. All right? The conflict statement should answer who or what is the antagonistic what? Force. In this case, the police. Okay? The police force. How does it directly threaten the protagonist? Of course, the threat is what? Is obvious. If you have to come up against an entire police force. And why can the protagonist not simply walk away? Okay? Why can't he just what? Walk away. He discovers that every witness connected to the case is what? Dying under suspicious what? Circumstances. So why can't he just what? Walk away? All right? And based on what we know of the protagonist so far, we can see that he has his last chance at what? Redeeming his career. Okay? And also, you can see the threat that a corrupt police force poses to what? To the entire what? Society. All right? So let's move on. Now the stakes. Stakes transform a story from interesting to what? Urgent. Because that's the mood you want to pass across when you're writing a movie. Things have to be urgent. Okay, you shouldn't have, the audience shouldn't have time to contemplate their own personal lives. You know, they should be drawn into the movie and stay there. So a sense of urgency is a way of keeping them focused. And you can do that using what? Stakes. What is at stake? What does the protagonist stand to what? Gain or what? Lose? So without clearly stated stakes, even the most compelling conflict feels low risk and therefore low interest. The stakes must be both personal. What does the protagonist lose? And universal. Why does it matter beyond this individual what? Story. Okay, so let's look at personal stakes. What does the protagonist personally risk? Career, life, family, identity, moral integrity. These are all risks, okay, to the person. So you have to make it as specific and visceral, that's as emotionally compelling as what? As possible. Let's look at universal what? Stakes. So stakes could be personal and they could be universal. And for your movie to work, you need to integrate both personal stakes and universal what? Stakes. So what larger truth or social consequence hangs in the what? In the balance? Justice, freedom, the integrity of institutions people do what? Trust. So let's look at the example. An example. If Daniel fails, the corruption network remains in power. The final witness dies, and the thousands of people harmed by the governor's network never see what? Justice. Okay? So this is an example of stakes in action. Okay? So this is a universal stake. It goes even beyond Daniel himself. Now, the unique element, that's another aspect of your pitch. What is unique about your movie? Okay? Because remember, you're writing in, maybe in a particular genre. People have done this over and over again. Okay, so what is unique about your own word, your story? A movie I can think of is Silence of the Lambs. It's a common, it operates on a common premise, an FBI officer trying to hunt down a serial killer. But to make it unique, they now used a female FBI agent, not just a female FBI agent, but she's young in the profession. And then also they now introduced another serial killer that's in prison, okay, to help her find this new serial killer or the serial killer she's looking for before the killer kills his next victim. So you're telling a common story, but you bring in nuances to make it what? Unique. So you have to include the unique element of your story in the pitch as well. So the unique element in your closing is your closing what? Argument. The answer to the producer's inevitable question, why this story and why now? It is your opportunity to articulate what makes your screenplay different from every other thriller, drama, or action film currently in what? Development. This is where creative voice meets commercial what? Positioning. Okay? So usually to make your story unique, you might need to fuse what? Genre. Okay? So you can combine two proven genres in a fresh way to create a broader audience and a distinctive what? Identity. All right. So an example, the film fuses investigative journalism with psychological suspense. That's the film we are working on e-speech. Okay, the film we about the journalist. Okay, that we are working on e-speech. Okay, you can see it fuses investigative journalism with psychological suspense. So fusing genre can help you create something what? Unique. Another thing you can do is take advantage of cultural specificity. Authentic, specific cultural what? Setting. Like the Lagos media landscape or Nigerian political what? Corruption. Okay, this is specific to Nigeria. Okay, it provides novelty and thematic what? Richness for both local and global what? Audiences. So you can use cultural specificity to give uniqueness to your what? Story. Another thing you can use is thematic what? Resonance. Thematic resonance. A story that speaks directly to a current social conversation has inherent marketing what? Momentum. Timely themes attract press attention and audience what? Engagement. So you're working with themes that resonate with trends. Okay? So you can inculcate that to make your story unique. So let's look at a complete pitch at work. Okay, we titled this The Last Witness. Okay, so we're putting together all the aspects of the 90-second pitch. So the following is an example of a complete professional grade 90-second pitch incorporating all 5 what? Elements. Study the structure, okay, not just the content. So let's read through it. What if a disgraced journalist received documents that could bring down the most powerful man in the world country? And the only way to survive was to publish before the last witness disappeared. The story follows Daniel, a once celebrated investigative journalist whose career was destroyed by a fabricated what? Scandal. When he receives anonymous documents exposing a powerful governor's corruption network, he begins investigating only to discover that witnesses are dying under mysterious what? Circumstances. As the conspiracy reaches deep into the police and courts, Daniel must risk everything to reveal the truth before the last witness is what? Silenced forever. Okay? So this is the pitch for the last what? Witness. So who are the target audience? Adults 18 to 45 who enjoy suspense thrillers and political what? Dramas. What are the comparable films? Because producers want to know, are there films like this one that have made money before? Because that's an evidence that if such a movie had made money earlier on, then probably it will still make money again. So you list the comparable movies, like in this case, Spotlight, Zodiac, State of. These are movies that you can compare to our last what? Witness. Okay, let's look at the final producer checklist. The final what? Producer checklist. What does a producer check before greenlighting your or recommending your script? So before recommending any script, experienced producers run through a final checklist. Every question represents a commercial and creative risk that must be satisfactorily answered before money is committed. A single major failure on this list is often enough to kill a project. So these are the things they check. Marketable concept. Is the core idea easy to communicate and compelling to a target audience? So that's what they ask. Is it marketable? The concept. Compelling opening. Do the first 10 pages create immediate engagement and demand the reader continue? Strong characters. Are the protagonist and antagonist fully realized, active, and emotionally engaging? Escalating tension. Does it get hotter as you go on? Does the story build consistently toward an inevitable and satisfying climax? Clear audience. Is there a specific, identifiable, reachable audience for this film? Affordable to produce. Can this film be made at a budget that makes financial sense for its market? Easy to market. Does the script contain the visual and narrative assets needed for an effective marketing campaign? So these are items that make up a producer's checklist. So as a writer, you should equally use this checklist to guide your writing. Let's look at the ultimate lesson. The most important insight any aspiring screenwriter or producer can carry out of this guide is this. A screenplay must function simultaneously as art and as business. Okay? So you should marry the art and the business. Okay? Neither dimension alone is sufficient. Great art that cannot be marketed will not get made. Also, commercially viable ideas without genuine storytelling craft will not last. They will fade away. So you need to marry art and business. Okay? To be able to do that, you need strong storytelling, concept, structure, character, conflict, and crafts working in harmony to create an emotionally compelling experience. Your story has to have a clear audience appeal, a defined reachable audience with demonstrated demand for the genre and themes of the story. And then market awareness, understanding of distribution channels, genre trends, comparable films, and current market appetites. And then production feasibility. A story that can be realized at a budget level that makes financial sense for its intended market and distribution strategy. So that's production feasibility. Your story should realize a budget level that makes financial sense, okay, for its intended market and distribution strategy. So the screenplay that Rents a recommend, which I trust is what you want, is the one that makes a reader believe they are holding the blueprint for the next great film and the business case for making it. Okay, remember, the reader is not interested in discrediting your story. In fact, he's looking for a story that he can present to his bosses, okay, to justify even his own payment and you know, his own employment. So whenever a reader can get a story that holds a blueprint for the next great film, they are he or she is overjoyed. Okay. So at this point, let's take your questions. But meanwhile, A round of applause for the presenter. Okay? A round of applause for the presenter. And then your stories. Let me mention that while we're waiting for the questions, as part of today's class, we will look at the assignment from the last class. Okay? We'll look at the assignment from the last class, the scripts that were written. We will not go through all of them. Bearing the time we have, maybe the next 20 minutes or so, we should be able to round off. But I'll go through some of the scripts. I'll go through some of the scripts to while we're waiting for your questions. The questions. Yeah. Oh, okay. So, shadows of silence. So, we want to look at a script, the assignment. Okay. We want to look at a script. The title is Shadows of Silence. So, what I'll do, I'll read through the script, okay, and point out I'll read through the script. I'll read through the script to okay, hold on. Find another one. Find another one. Find another one. It's okay. It's okay. All right. Let me read through. Read the questions from them. Yeah. The last brick improved. Okay, the screenplay by Aisha Uma. I didn't pronounce your name properly. Okay, so fading. You wrote scene 1. Okay. Sorry, I'm experiencing some technical problems here, but sorry, I can't continue with that one. Let me look at another script. The Last Record. This is for a short film screenplay written by Isuwa. Okay. Okay. This is the first scene. Int, that's interior, small bedroom studio, night. Okay. A cramped bedroom studio in Kaduna. Foam panels hang loosely on the walls. A desk holds a glowing laptop, MIDI keyboard, and tangled headphones. Okay, let me comment on this. I like the way you present your description, okay? Everything here so far, you notice everything is what? Acting. Everything from the foam panels, they hang, okay? Loosely on the walls. Then the desk holds a glowing laptop, okay? So that's good writing. But then from what we learned about vertical writing, the unfortunate, well, let me say, from what I can see, the paragraph is packed. Okay, I would advise that the first paragraph, okay, you move the next statement to another paragraph. If you had moved the next statement to another paragraph, it would have made more sense. Okay, but let me continue. Natura 26, focused and what? Determined. Taps rhythmically on the keyboard as a powerful beat forms. Okay, Natura is probably the protagonist. He is 26, okay? But you said Natura 26, focused and determined. How do you dramatize that on screen? Focused and determined, okay? Now, you can equally do that. Remember, he's looking at the computer, right? So Natura focuses, right? Okay, he focuses on the screen, taps rhythmically on the keyboard, okay, as a powerful beat forms. All right. So you're trying to describe Natura using focused and determined. You can't really see this on screen. Okay, but once we see him focus, he focuses on his screen, right? Of course, by watching it, you know this guy is what? Focused. He's busy, tapping away on the keyboard. He's actually busy. And then a powerful beat does what? Forms. Okay, so you might break it. Natura 26, okay, focuses on the screen. Okay, he focuses on the screen, taps away on the keyboard, and taps away on his keyboard, right? And, okay, a powerful beat forms. Now, okay, let's continue. Suddenly, his phone vibrates. Suddenly, his phone vibrates. Why the suddenly? Why do you include that? Remember, we said you need to eliminate ly words, okay? Adverbs. I need their questions, the one that's coming online. Hello? Adverbs and all that, okay? So you have to writing the suddenly here, okay? Doesn't really is an override then, because all you need to do is say his phone vibrates. That's sudden on its own. Okay? Nobody was expecting it, so it's a sudden event. So you don't need to say suddenly his phone vibrates. Okay? Remember, every item in your script is actually acting. Everything must be doing something. Okay? So the suddenly is not necessary. His phone vibrates. He checks social media. How do we know he's checking social media? Would the camera zoom in on his phone? Because recently I've noticed a lot of our movies, because of the use of mobile phones, okay? Personally, I find it distracting, okay, to zoom in on a phone. It's quite distracting, okay? But you could tell us he checks his phone, all right? We don't need to know whether it's social media or whatever. And then you say a viral music video appears with the caption produced by DJ Storm. How do you show this on screen? No, maybe the cinematographers can do that, but you are the one that's writing. Okay, you should be able to write in such a way that even the reader, because I'm reading it, I can't see the movie is not made yet, okay? And I'm thinking in pictures. Now, it becomes a problem once the reader starts thinking. Okay? So you should write in such a way not to allow your reader to think. They have to be captivated by what you're writing. Okay? So that's the problem with this. Okay? So his phone vibrates, he checks it, okay? And then the beat plays, Natura freezes. Okay? It's identical to his project file created weeks earlier. How do we know that? Does he tell us? Okay? So let's see whether we can rework this scene a bit. Okay? Let's see whether we can rework this scene a bit. Okay? Rather than his phone vibrating, okay, let's see. Imagine Natura is busy working, right? You know, tapping away on the keyboard, busy, focused, like you mentioned. And then his friend just, barges into the room, okay? And then now tells him, guy, listen. And then, gives him his phone, or maybe plays a tune, right? There's a tune on his phone, right? And then Natura now hears the tune and freezes, okay? And then Natura now says, that's my music, something like that. All right. So, so these are, remember, we are just, we're not saying this is good, this is bad or not. We're saying there's always room for what? Improvement. Okay. These are things you could do to this scene to enhance it. Okay. Now, Natura now says, no, that's my beat. Who is he talking to? All right. He's there alone based on what has been written. Natura is there in his room. Okay. He hears the music on the internet and then he's talking to himself. No, that's my beat. Would he say it aloud? I don't know. Is he saying it in his mind? Because from the structure of your script, he actually says it aloud because you wrote it as a dialogue. Okay. Now he said he opens his door project. The timestamp shows he created it 2 months earlier. The viral video already has millions of views. Now, this is just, you're telling us now, how do we see all these things on screen? Okay. One other thing, I'll commend the structure of your script because of the way you arranged it. The description is left flushed and then your dialogue is centered. Okay. That's a good arrangement, but the writing needs improvement. Okay. Like I've observed, Natura is there by himself. Introducing a second person could help bring the action in, to light. Okay, because if probably a friend had come in, Natura can now tell him, "Hey, look at the timestamp. I made this thing 2 months earlier." Okay, the friend may doubt him and all that, and then maybe peeps at the computer. Okay, and then the friend will tell him, what are you talking about? This video already has millions of viewers. Okay, so giving us the information that you needed to pass across. Okay, so let's continue. Now, this is your first scene and the reader is already, stuck there. Okay, the reader is already stuck in your first scene. So it's not really a good sign. Okay. Let's go to the next scene. Int Freestyle Music Nation Office Day. Okay. Natura sits with Pero 35, a respected music mentor. How do we know that? Does he wear respect on his shirt or something? Like he has a tag on his shirt that says respected music mentor. Okay. How to, they compare the project files carefully. You see, most of these things, how do you act it out? Like we're zooming in on the screen or something to look at the project files and all that, and all, so you need to improve on the writing, okay, to ensure that the whatever you're writing is what actable, okay. Okay, let's look at another script. Let's look at another script, okay. Okay, we're looking at another script. Okay, while the other script is loading, let me point out that Isua, the script we just read, you didn't include the log line. There's no log line here, okay. Let's look at another one by Ovie, okay. Sorry, I'm struggling with your name. Let me not balkanize it. Let me just call you Ovie, okay. The title is The Last Call. I would say, from what your formatting is not, it's not inviting. Sorry, okay. So please, you need to format this in a way that will be reader friendly, okay. So obvious title is what? The Last Call. Let's look at his log line. When a struggling university student discovers a lost phone containing evidence of a crime, he must decide whether to return it to its dangerous owner or expose the truth before the owner finds him first. Oh, that's interesting, but let's read through it again. Let's analyze it together. When a struggling university student discovers a lost phone containing evidence of a crime, he must decide whether to return it to its dangerous owner or expose the truth before the owner finds him first. Okay, so this is maybe against the background that the owner knows who is with the phone. Okay, the dangerous owner knows that he is what? With the phone. And okay, well, let's move on. Let's look at the script. So this is Screenplay. This is the first scene, and you're not supposed to number the scenes this way. The scene heading doesn't need a number, so you wrote number 1. That's not how this is done. Okay. Let me advise that we should equally download scripts online. There are a lot of scripts online, professionally written scripts. Okay, so if you're going to write your own script, make sure you look at one of those before you write yours. Okay, so int university library evening. I have a problem with this. Okay, how do you differentiate between evening and afternoon? Most of the time, you're creating a lot of unnecessary ambiguity. So we advise that you use day and night. Okay, it makes it what? Simpler. The library is quiet. Students whisper and type on laptops. Tunde 22, tired but determined, flips through a thick textbook. His stomach growls. Do we hear that on screen? Like the growling of his stomach, would we hear it? Okay, because he flips through a thick textbook. His stomach growls. You want to tell us that he's hungry. Why not say maybe he yawns, right? That would tell us, okay, it could be he's tired, he's hungry. But when you say his stomach growls, how do you depict that on screen? Or do we, I don't know. Okay, so you need to check that. His phone screen shows low balance. That's another thing. We need to now zoom in on his phone. It's distracting, okay? It's distracting. It takes away from the action going on, okay? So is there any other way you can show that his phone balance is what? Is low? Maybe someone wants to call with his phone. His friend says, can I make a call with your phone? He's like, oh boy, I don't even have money in my phone or something. Of course, he could be lying, okay? But I'm saying it's all about creativity. His phone screen shows, okay, maybe we zoom in on the screen, but like I said, this, it always takes away from the action. His size, okay? As he, why are you adding as he packs his bag? His size, he packs his bag, okay? He notices a smartphone on the table nearby, okay? No one around. He picks it up. The screen lights up. A video playing automatically. You see, you don't want to leave you know, it's still a problem. You know, how do you depict what you want, okay, rather than just zooming into the phone? Not that it can be done, but like I said, you know, from my own perspective, it always I find it distracting, okay? So on the screen, the same phone screen, a shaky recording of two men arguing in a dark alley. So we are now watching a movie inside a movie, okay? One pulls a knife, okay? Tunde freezes. The video ends. The phone rings. Caller ID unknown number. I'm already thinking too much as a reader on this your first page, okay? I'm already thinking too much, okay? I believe your first page. Tunde hesitates, then answers. Then you find a man, a voiceover. Did you find my phone? Okay. Tunde's eyes widen. Man, voiceover. Listen carefully. That phone belongs to me and you don't want to keep it. The call ends. Tunde stares at the phone, shaking. Okay. So that's your first scene. And like I said, I'm thinking a lot. And like I observed, most of the dialogue I've seen, most of them, the dialogue is left flushed rather than centered. Okay, so please, the dialogue should be what? Centered. And like I advised earlier, try to download scripts online. Okay, professional scripts online, download them and try to read through them so that you can see best practice at work. Let's look at another script. The title is The Last Message by Onyinyeoma Uzoma Onyemobi. Okay, Onyinyeoma Uzoma Onyemobi. The Last Message. Okay. So let's read through the log line. When a young radio intern accidentally receives a desperate voice message meant for someone else, she must decide whether to ignore it or track down the stranger before it is too late. As the situation becomes more urgent, her choice could determine whether a life is saved or lost. Okay, let me read it again. When a young radio intern accidentally receives a desperate voice message meant for someone else, she must decide whether to ignore it or track down the stranger before it is too late. As the situation becomes more urgent, her choice could determine whether a life is saved or lost. Okay, so let's go through the screenplay. The last message. Int, small radio station, evening. I've pointed this out before. Use day or night. Keep it simple. Okay? A cramped radio station, radio studio. Papers, microphones, and blinking sound equipment fill the room. Okay? Zainab, 24, focused but tired. How do you depict that on screen? Focused but tired. Okay? How do you depict that on screen? So we could see her, maybe Zainab 24, she focuses on her computer, right? That's focus. Okay? She stretches. She's tired. Okay? She's alone behind the console. Okay? She wears headphones and scrolls through audio files on a computer. She scrolls through what? Audio files on a computer. Now, at this point, remember that your writing is about a vivid imagery, right? So if you're going to be using and, you have to watch it. Because when you say, in fact, your writing directs the director and the cinematographer where to focus. For instance, it said she wears headphones. The camera goes to her headphones, okay, and scrolls through audio files on a computer. The camera has to go, pan to the what? Computer. All right. So you have to, in this case, she wears headphones. That's enough. She scrolls through audio files on a computer. That's another action. All right. So, but then why tell us, you can say she scrolls, on a computer, right? We don't need to know whatever it is she's scrolling, because so that the camera doesn't have to pan to the computer and show us what is inside there. But we can just see her focus. She focuses on the computer. She stretches. Okay, she's tired. We can see that. Okay, and then she's alone in the behind the console, and then she wears headphones. She scrolls through. So that's how you write it. Okay, remember that each statement is an action or a visual word image. The station is quiet. How do we, of course it is quiet. There's no noise now, so there's no point telling us it is quiet. Since there's no noise, except there's, there's no noise in the station now, so it is quiet. Okay? Her shift is almost over. How do we know that? There's no way we can know that, right? Except, of course, she says it. Okay? Or maybe she looks at the time and like, where is this guy? Or, but there has to be a way. You're telling us, you're not showing us. Her phone vibrates on the table. Okay? She glances at it. A new voice message from an unknown number. Okay, now we have to zoom into the phone now. All right? To see the message. And then unknown. How do we even know it's an unknown number? Is it like it comes with a tag, unknown? All right? Yeah, people hide their numbers and all that. But then, now you have to, focus on the phone. And like I said, this is distracting. All right? Because we are trying to even get to know this character. And then you're pulling us away from her. Okay? Zainab frowns. Okay? She frowns. She presses play. How do we, okay, we have to see her finger on the phone pressing what? Play. I hope you know that's what this statement means. Okay, so I hope you guys are following, with the why some of these the things I'm highlighting. Okay, you're trying to paint a visual image. These are things we see on screen. So she presses play. A man's voice shaky and what? Frightened. Okay, shaky and frightened. How do you? Okay, so maybe the man's voice breaks, right? Okay, so shaky and frightened. How do we dramatize that? So man, voice over. All right, that's nice. That's VO, voice over. Okay. If anyone hears this, please help me. I'm near the old bridge outside town. My car broke down and I think someone is following me. Okay, now this is where you show the man's fears, right? You have to break the statement, like because when you are frightened, your train of thought is easily truncated. So by breaking the statement, if anyone hears this, please help me. You break it so that by breaking it, even the reader, can feel what the man or what you're conveying. But you just wrote it straight. If anyone hears this, please help me. I'm near the old bridge outside town. There's no urgency to it. Okay? And one other thing I want to point out is you learn to use vertical writing. Don't let your writing drag to the end, all right, of the margin. Okay, break it. Like you could have this. If anyone hears this, please help me on one line. Then move the other one to the next line. I'm near the old bridge outside town, because by doing it, of course, the reader will pause at the end of the line, right, before moving to the next line. Okay. Okay, and here you actually broke it, and ... I think someone is following me. All right. Zainab sits upright. Okay. The message continues. What is that about? The message continues. Would it flash on the screen? You have to understand that every line you write here has to be shown on screen. The message continues. You're trying to tell us that, of course, but it's not necessary. Okay. And now, because you move to the next page, that's some other thing I need to point out. If you're writing a script, you're in dialogue mode. The man is still talking. VO in parentheses, that's voice over. Okay. You could include in another parenthesis, continued. That's CONTD. Short form in parentheses. Now, by moving to the next page, we know that is this same man that was talking before. He just continues talking. So you don't need to insert the fact that the message continues here. Okay? So the man continues, my name is Tunde. If something happens, please tell my sister. I tried to make it home. The message cuts off. Why are you telling us that? Okay? And then you wrote silence fills the room. By, you're repeating you don't need to tell us the message cuts off. By the time you say silence fills the room, we know, of course, nobody's talking anymore. Okay? Zainab checks the number again. Unknown. Okay? Okay, we are back to the phone. Or is she telling us, so you have to watch it. Okay, the unknown, does it flash on the screen? Where is this unknown coming from? She sighs, uneasy. What does that mean? Of course, she sighs. It shows she's uneasy. All right. So you don't need to, tell us. You've already shown us by she's sighing. Okay. We know she's what? Uneasy. So you have to trust your audience. when you're writing, you don't have to spoon feed us on everything. And meanwhile, you have to paint a visible or visual picture. Zainab, this in dialogue mode now, quietly. Quietly. What does that mean? What is quiet? Okay? If you say whispers, fine, but quietly, what is quiet for you may be loud for some other person. Okay? So she whispers, probably a prank. She grabs her bag, ready to leave, but she hesitates. She plays the message again. This time she notices something faint in the background. A distant car horn. Oh, now, is she the one noticing this, or would we hear the car horn too? All right? Because we are supposed to hear the car horn. Okay? And how do you, okay, maybe, I don't know, but maybe they have to manipulate the audio so to highlight the horn for us to hear it. Because if we didn't hear it the first time, then it means that probably, you might need to work on the audio to highlight the car horn. So these are some of the technicalities that you have to consider in rewriting your script. Her expression changes to what? Her expression changes. Did she start laughing? Did she start jumping? What was, do you understand? You're not specific here. Her expression changes. Something about it feels real. Is this a statement she made? Or what is, I don't know, I don't understand. But you wrote this as a description, not a dialogue. She slowly sits back down. Okay? She slowly sits back down. Okay? Remember we said try to get rid of adverbs and adjectives. Okay, what do you mean by slowly, like in slow motion or what? Okay, you have to find a more active verb to replace this. Cut to, like I said, if your script is not already built for shooting, there's no need for all these transitions except where it's necessary, because they cut the narrative flow. Okay, they cut the narrative flow. So this is the like I pointed out, if the reader has to argue with your script like I am doing now, it means, okay, you've not really done your homework properly. Okay, so please note some of the things I highlighted and try to see if you can rework the script. Okay, you rework the script. All right, just rework the script to get it to this required standard. It's not a problem that your script is flagged for certain faults. It's normal, okay? It's normal, but you have to rework it till you get it to the required standard. Questions for today. Tell her. Get me I'm talking about their questions online now. Okay, so that's it about the scripts. Okay, so let's look at some of your questions for today. Okay. Okay, I need more guideline on how to use the app. You direct this question to the admin, please. Okay. Please, I was not in the last class. I was in the hospital due to my illness. Keep the question to today's topic. Your questions, if you have any other question outside this, you can send it to the admin. Okay. Let's see whether there are questions from today's class. Okay, most of these questions, late submission, please address it to the what? Admin. Okay. Okay. Most of the questions here are connected to grading and all that and all that. The admin would address that. Okay. I need questions from today's class. Okay. Okay. Still searching for questions from today's class. Okay, please explain what is a trailer. Okay, it's just a 2-minute kind of movie clip, okay, that's meant for marketing. They just take exciting scenes, okay, about 3 or 5 exciting scenes from your movie, okay, and then put them together into a sort of a video, okay, that people can view so that they can have an idea of what the movie, the entire movie or the full movie is like. So it's a marketing tool to make people want to watch the movie, okay? So for you to get a trailer that works, all right, you need to inculcate it into your writing, like we mentioned, so that there can be exciting scenes or even a spectacle that can be used to grab attention. Okay, that's what will be used to make up what? A trailer. Okay. All right. In the absence of any more questions, okay. Okay, what is a trailer? I think I've answered that already. Okay. So in the absence of any other questions, I think okay. Okay, somebody asks, for instance, Frank and Nsobu, the interpreter, can I write and interpret one language to another in a scene? I think I addressed this the last time. You know, if you're writing, assuming you can write in a particular language and it helps you flow, write in that language, okay? But remember, when you want to submit it for vetting, you have to write in a language the people would understand, okay? So that's all I can say. So you can write in your house or Igbo and then translate it to English, okay? So that's what I have to say to that. That's I think the question is from Prince. Okay. All right. So in the absence of any more questions, I guess we have to call it an evening. Thank you guys for tuning in. See you next time.
All right. Thank you everyone for joining. For those that have some challenges regarding assignment submission and completing their quiz on the app, please, if you're still having some challenges submitting your assignments, do well to upgrade the app. All right. The app we are using for completing the assignment and the quiz is Link School app. Right? If you've been added to any group, and of course, I believe every one of us here is in one group or the other. So please ask your questions in that group so that you will get help navigating whether through the app or understanding things about the program. All right. Thank you all and have a nice evening.